Hi there, and welcome to Lesson 10.1b. In today's video lesson, we're going to be focusing on the midpoint formula. Go ahead and write down the midpoint formula in your notes. This formula is used to find the midpoint or middle point in between any two given points on the coordinate plane. If you need to pause the video so that you have a chance to write this in your notes, go ahead and do that. Okay, now that you have it, let's talk about how this formula works. Like, how do you find the middle of any two numbers? Let's start there. So let's say that I asked you to find the middle of the numbers 11 and 21. Like, what number is in the exact middle? Well, one thing you could do is line up all the numbers from 11 to 21 and cross out the ends until you get to the middle, and that's 16. Okay, that's one way of doing it. Now, the other way of doing it is figuring if I want the middle of 11 and 21, the middle is also the same thing as the average. So how would I find the average of the two numbers 11 and 21? Well, in order to find the average, you would want to add the numbers together and you would get the sum of 32. And then after you get the sum of 32, you would take 32 and divide it by 2 because there's two numbers, and that would give you the average. So if I want the average of any two numbers, I can add them and divide by 2 because there's two numbers. Okay, so thinking about the middle in terms of finding average will really be helpful in understanding how the midpoint formula actually works. Because if you look at it, you are going to be finding the average of the x's by adding the two x values together and dividing by the two numbers. And you're also finding the average of the y coordinates. You add the two y coordinates together and you divide by 2 to find that average. So midpoint is really all about finding the average, which is a middle value. Okay, so let's give this a try. Here I'm asking you to find the midpoint between the points 2, 6 and 4, 2. So let's first begin by giving us a visual of what this looks like. Go ahead and plot the point 2, 6 there and 4, 2 here. And we're going to find the point that's directly in the middle of those 2 points. Now, I'm not going to let you use the graph paper just yet. Let's go ahead and apply the formula. Okay, so remember we're going to get an ordered pair as our answer. And so you can kind of see that the formula, it looks like an ordered pair, doesn't it? And so here, to get the first coordinate of the ordered pair, I want to find the average of the x's. So go over to the points. Here's an x coordinate, and here's an x coordinate. We're going to add them together, and then we're going to find the average by dividing by 2. So let's add them together, 2 plus 4, and then we're going to divide that by 2, and that's going to give us the average of the x coordinates. So let's just go ahead and do that right now. I know that 2 plus 4 is 6, and if I take 6 and divide it by 2, I would get 3. Now let's find the average of the y coordinates. So here's my first y coordinate, 6, and then I have 2. Let's add them together, 6 plus 2, and then we're going to divide by 2 because there's two numbers. So 6 plus 2 is 8, and when I take 8 and I divide it by 2, I get 4. So right here, 3 comma 4 is our midpoint. Now let's go over to the graph and let's check it out. So if I go over 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, this right here is the point 3, 4. Now if you connect the 2 points, you can see here that yes, 3, 4 in fact is in the very middle of the 2 points that we graphed. So that's how the midpoint formula works. You're just simply finding the average of the x coordinates and the average of the y coordinates, and then whatever you get is the middle point. Okay, so kind of fun. All right, let's try another one. Number 6. Let's find the midpoint between the points 4, 3 and negative 1, 6. So let's start by graphing those points, 4, 3, and then also make a point at negative 1, 6. All right, I'm going to switch my color so it's a little bit easier for you to see. All right, I'm not going to connect them just yet here. I'm just going to use my algebra to figure this out. So big, oops, big ordered pair, comma in between. All right, we want to find the average of the x coordinates. So let's take the x coordinates, 4 and -1, and we're going to add them together. So I got 4 plus -1. And because there's two numbers, I would divide by 2. There's two numbers. So 4 plus -1 is 3, and 3 divided by 2, instead of writing 3 halves, I could also just write that as 1.5. Okay, comma, comma. My final answer is going to be down here at the bottom. All right, now let's go ahead and we're going to find the average of the y coordinates. Okay, go back over to the point. Here's a y coordinate and here's a y coordinate. Let's add them together. 3 plus 6. We add the two numbers together and divide by 2 because there's two numbers. So 3 plus 6 is 9 halves. But I also could write 9 halves. 9 divided by 2 could also be written as 4.5, and it's going to make it much easier to graph on the coordinate plane, right? So come on over here to the graph. If I were to graph 1.5, so I'm going to go over 1.5 is about here, and then up 4.5. 1, 2, 3, 4.5. This is where that would be located. Now, if you connect the 2 points, you can see that this point is exactly in the middle. And this is at 1.5, 1.5, comma 4.5. Whether you decide to write it in fraction form, like this and this, or you decide to write it in decimal form, it's the same thing. So there's our midpoint, our middle point located right there. Okay. So it doesn't always necessarily mean it's going to come out to whole numbers, is what I wanted to show you on here. All right, let's try number 7. So go ahead and start off by graphing the 2 points. So we've got -6, 6, and we've got 5, 4. We want to find the point that's exactly in the middle. Okay, oops. All right, so let's start by finding the average of the x coordinates. So here's an x coordinate, here's an x coordinate. I want to add them together, -6 plus 5, and then I want to divide by 2 because there's two numbers. Okay, so -6 plus 5, that's -1 divided by 2. Now that's just -1/2. You could write it that way, or you could write it -0.5. It doesn't really matter. Okay, they're both the same thing. Okay, now let's find the average of the y coordinates. So that's this one and this one. So -6 plus 4. We want to add them together. Oops. Divided by 2. -6 plus 4 in the numerator is -2. And then when you divide that by 2, you would get -1. So I could simplify this part right here, -1. So you could write your answer with the fraction in it, -1/2, comma -1, or as a decimal. They're both equivalent. So let's go over here to the graph. Let's graph that. So here, if I start at the 0, 0, I go -1/2, which is right here, and then I'm going to go down 1. So right here is where I'm saying the middle point is. I'll try and draw a straight line as straight as possible. And hopefully you can kind of see, or at least believe me, that yes, that point is located in the exact middle of the two given points. So again, I'm just finding the average of the x coordinates and I'm finding the average of the y coordinates. And that's the midpoint formula. Kind of fun, kind of easy. So be sure you have the formula written in your notes, and always keep in mind that your answer when you're finding the midpoint is always going to be an ordered pair, because we're finding a point that's in the middle of two other points. All right, thank you for joining me. Have a great day.